Welcome back to the podcast, Evelyn. I am so excited to dive into the astrology for the month of July. I know we have some really interesting things going on, and I can't wait for you to share your knowledge.
Thank you for having me back again for the month ahead astrology forecast. And yes, this month is quite important in terms of the transits that are coming upon us. Some big shifts and dynamic changes that we will get into.
I love it. I love it. Where do you want to start? I know this past June has had a lot transition, and it feels as if I starting to sense more coming. So, what is the theme that you would have for July?
For July, the themes I base it off of generally the new and full moons, which are the full moon is in Capricorn, and then the new moon is in Cancer. Um, and then also the other really major transit that's coming up. But in general, the theme is going to be about family, ancestry, home, your relationship to what success looks like, and what you want to put out into the world, as well as a big theme later on in the month of final closure.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm.
Does that have something to do? I know we're going into a Venus shadow and then retrograde. Does that have something to do with possibly that?
The Venus retrograde, I would say a little bit, but mostly with the nodes shifting into a new sign axis, and then also Pluto squaring the nodes this year, which is massive and happens when in a week, within a week, where all of these other shifts are going on. So the beginning of July is quite tame, I'd say, but then the second half of July is where things get really amped up.
Ooh, okay. So what are the dates of the full moon and the full moon in Capricorn?
So the full moon in Capricorn is on July 3rd, and it's going to be at 4:38 a.m. at 11 degrees Capricorn. And it's going to be opposing Mercury. So the sun and Mercury will be together in Cancer, and then the moon will be trining Jupiter. So Jupiter and Mercury are coloring and flavoring the full moon for us, which is about communication and our beliefs and how we speak and how we communicate about our families, as well as our past and what our future trajectory looks like. So, one main thing that comes up for that is reformatting our communication or our thinking patterns towards an image of what success looks like based off of our own personal views of success rather than maybe what your family's view of what success looks like. And allowing yourself to expand upon what success can be rather than limiting yourself to the car, the house, the family, the bank account sort of thing. The moon will be trine in Jupiter and opposite Mercury. So it is a lot about how we talk to ourselves, how we talk about ourselves, how we talk about our history, how we talk about our family. And I know that, there's this kind of, we all have a dialogue about our family that we say to ourselves and we say to everyone else, right? We have this kind of ingrained storyline that we have about our mothers and our fathers and our relationship to them. And so the full moon is going to allow us to expand on that, to maybe see the opportunities or benefit, or just maybe even if you have maybe a more negative or ill history or relationship, expanding yourself to imagine what the benefit of that relationship meant for you,
Yes.
and
How do you,
and just reframing that story into something, because that's who you are, right? That's, if you like shit talk your family, you're essentially shit talking yourself.
well, what's so interesting is that we all have stories of childhood, right? They're all, most of us have traumatic experiences of some kind during childhood, whether it's our parents or our siblings or whatever. But without those, we would not be who we are today. And it's hard to see that in the moment, and it's hard to see it until honestly, until I feel like you reach your 30s or 40s, because we're still so involved in our family, even through our 20s, that you have to get away from it to see it. Okay, this is the full moon chart.
Yes, so here is the full moon. You have the sun and Mercury over here in Cancer, and then the moon making a nice trine to Jupiter throughout the day, and it also sextiles the sun and Mercury. It's a separating transit. So earlier before the full moon, which is oftentimes the most potent part, the moments just before a full moon is when the energy is waxing and we can feel the energy building. So while the energy is building for the full moon, it's making aspects to Jupiter, and then it wanes into an aspect with Mercury. So it's building with its aspect to Jupiter, which is this uh, build of future prospects, ambitions, belief about yourself. Since Jupiter is in Taurus, it's going to be about your relationship to how you view your financial world, your value in life too. So, right to your point, it's sometimes hard to see ourselves, through the forest, outside of the forest, through the trees. Once we gain a bit of distance from our families and our upbringing, then we can see it a bit differently and then start to reformat how we talk about our history. But it's definitely going to be, and it doesn't have to be specifically about family, like you're mentioning, just childhood experiences in general, um, even childhood friends. Capricorn is the sign that's associated with uh, kind of structures and systems that we adhere to as well. So it's going to be building and expanding on what we think is possible when it comes to creating structures in our lives that are in alignment with our belief systems.
And it's so interesting just with that. I'm noticing Uranus coming to start to trine, maybe it's a loose one, that Pluto. Um, that won't be until next year, though, really, right?
Yeah, yeah, but it's in that, and Pluto's retrograding backwards, so it's doubly applying, which makes it even more potent. But we're under the influence of it. Yeah, for sure.
And how would that show up in, what is a Pluto Uranus trine typically?
Well, that one is different. That one, since it's those two planets are so slow, it's very influential when it comes to our relationship to the collective experience. So it's going to be a relationship to our friend structures and how we identify or not identify in the public arena or with friends or groups of people. So some people might go through and it's a trine, so it's mutually fluid with each other.
Right.
But I think by next year it's going to be in the air elements. So the trine will move into um will it be?
And I don't know if it's next year because I don't know if Uranus gets to Gemini, maybe end of
It
next. I don't know if it does end of
it
next.
might miss the it might I think it's going to miss the earth trine. It's going to trine in the air element. Um so of course friendship. friendship, community, how we connect with one another and restructure our relationship to social media and also the collective in general. So I think social media is going to go through a massive change next year, and there's probably going to be huge migrations of people. There's probably going to be huge cancelings of certain platforms and migrations from one place to another. But it's also a trend, so it might actually empower some social media platforms and make them more powerful and more ingrained into our lives to the point where we feel like we have to participate in these platforms in order to connect with each other at all.
That's so interesting. I feel like that definitely was something that came up in 2020. Um, like
Right.
yeah, that was like the only way you were able to connect.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think just the way that we move information between one another is going to change. It's getting, with every new iPhone update, there's some new emoji, avatar, like DM, voice memo thing that you can do that's getting kind of like
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yes. Well, yeah, with that kind of that unveiling of the AI systems and how that's kind of taking shape, and I don't
Hmm.
know how it's going to integrate quite yet.
Well,
So
I think by that time, when Uranus trines Pluto in the air element, will be fully integrating with just mental transference. Just, I think we're finally gonna, there will be a group of people that have been able to harness just communication through the mind, telepathic communication. That's probably going to get ramped up because I believe I think it was ever since probably around 2016
yeah.
when Uranus entered Taurus, it felt as though, when you're on your phone, you're thinking about your friend and then they text you a response to what you're thinking. Like, wow, how did that happen? I just think that's going to get even more, that's going to accelerate tenfold,
Yeah.
especially by the time Uranus and Pluto are there. And to the point where maybe we're like, maybe we don't even need these devices because we're all connected telepathically anyway.
Yeah. And do you think that that was the device that was able to pick those nuances up, or because there was a lot of times for me, it was like you'd be thinking about, I don't know, like a red dress, let's say. Not that that's something I really thought about, but let's just use that as an example. And then the phone would start to show you
Oh,
like
yes.
images for it.
Oh my God, yes. It's getting so ridiculous.
So so I don't know if that's where I'm like, is it telepathy or is it the phone actually starting to understand how our brains actually work and function?
AI. Here we go into AI. Yeah, the algorithm too might get even more finely tuned in.
To what's going, yeah, the human
Hmm.
nature. Okay.
Hmm. Which I don't know, maybe will be convenient, maybe it'll be annoying. I know that it's like, what's the point of getting an ad for a red dress when I already bought it? Which is what
Right.
seems to be the trend with AI or algorithm marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it's just listening to everything and feeding you back what you're talking about or what
Hmm.
that type of thing.
Yeah, we might get, maybe that'll be our form of self-reflection is through the capitalism and social media.
Gosh, that seems like it's already happening. Um, okay, so this is July 3rd. What happened? So
Yes.
then what's next after this?
So, do you want to go through the full moon or should we go through the timeline?
Well, I'm curious. I know Venus goes retrograde because it does a full retrograde in Leo. right?
Mhm.
Well,
Yes.
the first time it's in a long time, not the first time, but in a long time, it's doing a full retrograde in the sign of Leo.
Yes. And
Uh,
that's later in the month on the 22nd. And
okay.
there's a lot that happens in that whole week. Um,
So do you want to
so
dive into that week or what happens between July 3rd and that week? Is
how
there any?
about let's go into the full moon
Okay.
next, and then, or new moon, I'm sorry, which is the 17th. And then, yeah, there's a few ingresses that happen, and then that big week in
Mhm.
July, which is where a lot of stuff ends up happening. So, July 17th is when the new moon is in Cancer at 24 degrees, 56 minutes at 11:31 a.m. So this is the chart for us here on the West Coast. That's what it's going to look like. The sun is going to be high in the sky. It's going to be noon, and the moon is going to be right there with the sun. And we're going to be full in on our summer season at this point. The nodes also will be shifting uh, on the same day as the new moon. And as you can see, makes a T square with Pluto. We get a bit of a preview of that Pluto T squaring the nodes and the shift of, so we have the nodes at 0, 0, and then shortly after the new moon, the nodes the hit the new axis point. So a lot of newness, right? A lot of new things coming in for us, a lot of new experiences, beginnings, fresh starts, fresh looks at who we are and what we want to start putting our energy into. So, the full moon earlier on July 3rd is a great time to do that processing of releasing and letting go so that when the new moon comes in, we have an understanding of we're starting to, what we're beginning, what journey we're beginning, essentially, what new form of emotional connectivity we are starting to initiate for ourselves.
So looking at this chart, um, what would you say that the biggest thing that stands out? Like what should we be looking at to focus that energy on?
So, the biggest thing, well, I just wouldn't really plan a lot around this day. New moons, off, especially in water signs, are oftentimes, very emotionally or energetically draining. And especially with the Pluto opposition, it's going to be, our strong feelings are going to come to surface. We're going to have very strong emotional reactions to our surroundings in general. And so we just might want to take the care that we need to comfort and nurture and self-soothe ourselves during that period and do what we need to do to reorient and refocus our trajectory. So I guess to make it more specific, um, I would stay in bed, probably just sleep all day this
Really?
day. I think naturally, as for me personally, because your moon is in a water sign, I don't have a lot of water in my chart. The water moons really drain me. They really just suck my energy. But for other signs and other people, it might be very inspiring, very enlightening, a really beautiful time to connect with their loved ones and family. And also, I always think that whenever Pluto comes to make a scene, also anytime Chiron's around, we have Chiron making a trine to Mercury, moving into a trine with Mercury, and separating trine with the or square with the sun and moon is an awesome, wonderful time to just reconnect with people that maybe you've lost touch with, or maybe there's some things that were left unsaid or left undone that just needs a little repair or patchwork.
Okay. Yeah, that I mean that it is. It's in its home sign, that moon. Yeah, but and that Pluto opposition just, yeah, seems, that seems like a little challenging day for sure.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be in general throughout the rest of the month, the theme of kind of coming to terms with yourself or being very honest with yourself. With yes, the Venus retrograde in Leo, that happens later, and Mercury in Leo that happens, some transits with that happen. Just being very honest with your role and the role that you play in your relationships and how you also contribute to, you know, any any moments of joy or pain. um, I always love the quote or the saying, it takes two hands to clap, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, okay. So that's a good, I mean, that's a good suggestion. Just, keep an eye out on this day. Just take it easy, almost take it easy on yourself, is what it.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I think, especially with an opposition with Pluto, there can be a tendency to beat yourself up over things that have been done or just going through the history, kind of like, oh man, shoulda, woulda, coulda is pretty strong with this new moon, but it's a new moon. So you're learning to overcome that and say, okay, I may have made mistakes, but I'm going to take charge of how I interact or how I navigate my future.
Okay, perfect. And then
Yeah.
after this, so this kind of comes up on that big week you were talking about.
Yeah. So, and then also just little side notes.
Yeah.
We have on July 10th, Mars ingresses into Virgo. And then on the same day, or I believe on the 11th, Mercury is opposite, or Mercury ingresses into Leo and then is opposite Pluto.
Mm.
So we have two ingresses happening. Mars in Virgo on the 10th, which is probably a very much welcomed energy for some people, as it might feel as though just tension or aggressions may be tampered. There's more focus on being like organizing your life, organizing your work. May notice people just relaxing a little bit more and just being less aggressive in general. Also, learning how to plan your actions accordingly and setting yourself up for the rest of the year. So, this is a really great time to organize and plan out sort of your plan of your mode of action when it comes to your work. Also, with Mars and Virgo, though, you might notice some tensions or confrontations with work or like coworkers and employees, and just having to navigate the nitty gritty kind of small details around conveniences in the workplace.
Okay. Though that's a nice mutual reception though, right? Mars wanting to be in where Mercury is and Mercury wanting to be where Mars is. Right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And then Mercury being, let's see.
Leo.
Um, yes. Let me
Also,
just.
I want to say great for Mars in Virgo, great for any type of housework or housekeeping. My astrologer always said the best housekeeper is a Mars in Virgo person.
100%. I would definitely allow any Mars and Virgo to organize my life
Exactly.
and set my schedule.
Exactly. It's not the easiest Mars to have in your chart, to be honest, but yeah, that definitely is like meticulous. So that nice kind of mutual reception with that Mercury, I feel like it could really be um almost a good thing.
Yeah. And so here's the the day for Mars ingressing into Virgo, and then um, the Mercury ingressing into Leo as well. And then on the day that, Mercury does ingress into Leo, we're seeing all the T squares that get lit up with the opposition to Pluto and the T square with the nodes.
Right.
So I feel like this one again goes back to the being very honest with yourself, being very clear with how you speak and how you communicate about yourself, to yourself, with yourself, to other people, uh, because, the things that we say has a ripple effect on others. And I think this is the day where we really see how the things that we say can affect other people around us, especially if you're someone that is a leader or has a large following, or where people really listen to you for information and trust your guidance with your words. This is going to be a very strong day for those people to, one, either step up to the plate to communicate really difficult things that need to be communicated, or share information and wisdom that is going to maybe affect people in a very strong way, but needs to be said anyway. So information might come out to surface. You might get messages from people that might be more on the heavier side, or difficult to hear, or just have to have those conversations that you maybe have put on the back burner regarding your deeper feelings about, how something affected you.
Right. Well, and you see that sextile. I mean, you have that nice Mars. There's a lot of 0 degree energy,
Mm.
which is always the most potent, right? It's like the newest, most potent energy. Um, so that'll be
Mhm.
interesting. I mean, that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds because it's
Yes.
the last legs of that of the nodes.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So then, okay, let's see. There's so much. Should we get into the ingress?
Yeah.
The North Node
Yeah,
ingress
let's do
into
the
Aries.
ingress. I'm a little nervous about that ingress actually, but um just because I have nothing in Aries and all my stuff is in Libra with Scorpio Libra.
Oh, right, right. Well, I'm sure you've been feeling something, kind of rumbling in your unconscious.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't. South Node always kind of stirs me up because I don't really understand it. I kind of understand it, but I don't fully grasp the concept of every time the South Node hits a personal planet. I've had it
Hmm.
now hit all my Scorpio planets, including my Mercury, which is at 2 degrees. And, I'm seeing different things kind of come up in work and in with my children and things like that. But I'm trying not to look at them as losses, even though when I associate the South Node, I associate it with loss.
Hmm. Yeah, something that you're overcoming, letting go, losing, walking away from, integrating, or just integration, which is also very scorpionic. Rather than totally letting go, is maybe learning to integrate it
Mm.
within who you are. Because yeah, I was contemplating the whole South Node Scorpio thing also, because it is interesting to pair those two. Because when we think of Scorpio, there is the tendency to want to, well, with Scorpio and Taurus in general, this push and pull between holding on to something and letting it go completely is the kind of opposition that Taurus and Scorpio have to manage for themselves. And when the South Node's in Scorpio, it's like, nope, just burn it all down, let it go, push it all away. Um, don't worry about, having to hold on to that. But then the North Node is learning to build and cultivate from what you've already created. So it's kind of oxymoronic, and yeah, it's kind of a strange dichotomy I was contemplating the other day. Like what do you feel like for you that has been coming
You know,
up?
it really came with all this stuff that was happening with the South Node going over. So the South Node, started with my Uranus at 27, and then it hit my Moon and my Venus, and then it just recently hit my Mercury. So all these different points, there was some form of not just letting go of whatever I thought I was supposed to happen, right?
Mm,
So this is supposed to happen. No, that didn't happen, right? So letting go of the ideas I was holding on to around that. And then with the Taurus, so trying really hard to focus on the Taurus, like where am I growing things? Like where am I investing more of my time in things that are material or financial, or even in the earth. We did a lot of planting outside, but it's definitely been a hard one because it feels like it almost put me or threw me out of my natural element state of having this immense powerful control in my career or in my business house, where I kind of had to just let it go. Like,
mm,
okay, well, if whatever is going to happen is going to happen, and I have to just accept it in this
mm,
way. So that's really how it felt for the past 18 months. And then the idea of it going into Libra, and going into Libra and going into Aries. Well, that Aries, I always associate with this war energy and this very aggressive type of behavior, which I don't innately have because didn't have any planets there. Um, but then with all my stuff in Libra, I'm like, this is going to be a total, almost like reformatting or letting go of things that are in my normal being of who I am as a person, and starting to let go of pieces that maybe are past their time, right? Because it's like it kicks up. The idea is it's like the end of the tail end of the dragon, right?
mhm,
And it kicks up and cleans out old debris.
mhm,
So it's going to kind of come in and clean out my Pluto in Libra, right? But that always like kicks up that fear energy of like what's going to die, what's going to pass. Is this a negative? Can I look at this as a positive? um so that's actually a question, like for you, how do you look at that when the south node transits over something like Pluto?
I've noticed well, the South Node transited over my Pluto earlier this year, and it was for me in Scorpio, a letting go of and because it was in my first house, also is letting go of my identity around certain wounds that I had as a child, and not letting that be a part of who I am. And interestingly, because sometimes things don't happen, right? Sometimes there isn't a aha moment where something happens. You're like, oh, this is what that transit is. But actually, on that day, I did have something that came in that was really powerful, and it did effectively change the way that I start to interact with my relationships, which is where the North Node is for me in the seventh house. And it's a personal story, but my mom called me
Uh-huh.
that day to apologize for just the pain and the trauma that I went through as a child.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, I didn't know how to, it was like in shock. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I don't know how to respond to this. And then I immediately went, I was like, oh my God, like looked at my chart, like, what is going on? Oh, South Node is on my Pluto. That's just so appropriate for me. And it, so I think it was an internal experience of, okay, I feel like I can lay this to rest. Like
Mhm.
I feel like there's closure for me. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be a sadness around something that's moving away from you consciously, but it can be a feeling of getting that recognition or closure or the ability to move on,
Yeah.
basically, which is what and something definitely energetically shifted in me because of that. So,
Bet. I bet there's an acknowledgement that comes from a parent saying that they didn't do something right, and something that's affected you for, your life. There's a huge acknowledgement. And now that you're mentioning that, I'm thinking back to, because over the past 18 months that South Node has been in Scorpio with my moon Venus, and my mother too, and came out, and there was a conversation, and she admitted to her being a narcissist, right? Which I
wow.
always knew, and I was very well aware of at this point.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
that's so interesting you say that, because um, that's in my 10th house, but the North Node's been going through Taurus in my fourth as well. So I've
Wow.
always known there's going to be some mother thing, and yes, that was a huge moment where, there's that acknowledgement that your child has experienced something, and that
Hmm.
it's actually not been the best, but it's been a part of their history, and there's a clearing that happens with that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's so, it's very rare, right? That's a very rare situation to happen for anyone's parent to admit or confront those shadow aspects of themselves. But because you've got Moon in Scorpio and it's in the 10th house, which is so public and
Right.
so exposed, that it's almost as if she couldn't ignore it or hide it anymore.
Oh, that's interesting. That is
Mhm.
such an yes. You like it had to come out at some point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Cuz it probably was so apparent to, the people that know you as a child or her friends or the people in her life, to the point where she couldn't like hide from it.
Yes. Oh no, absolutely. Everybody was fully aware at this point, right? Because it's been going on for so long. And that behavior, was so, I mean, we think about growing up as like an 80s kid or a 90s kid, and there's a behavior that was happening, at least for me and like my girlfriends and a lot of their moms, that that was very narcissistic. It was almost like the first time they could in that they could go out and start to do things on their own.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was an interesting, I will say it's been the most interesting moment of my life, of my healing journey, where somebody actually, so that person finally admits to what's been going on the whole time.
Mhm. That's incredible.
So yeah, so maybe it's something to look forward to, the South Node.
I think so. I think as long as you're honest with yourself and honest with um your experiences and what comes up in your life, and just when I just say self because it's going over the sun, right? So the
Mhm.
sun is about your own personal ego and how it was developed and how it expresses itself currently. So, with the south node going over the sun, for all of us Libras this year and into next year. It is coming into a lot of the shadow aspects come out with the South Node. It's being honest about our tendencies to maybe hide from conflict or not be so upfront about how we're feeling about things, or wanting to gloss over or maintain equality to the detriment of truth and honesty. And then moving towards or identifying how we can not totally throwing our etiquette out the window, mind you, but like how we can use our understanding of right collaboration, equality, and conflict resolution, but to get what we want and to not ignore our own needs and self-expression. And it's interesting, that whole dichotomy between, it's pretty common now, I think, that we understand when you repress your needs, you grow resentment. And then that resentment turns out to look like pettiness, jealousy, aggressiveness in other areas of our life. So I think with the North Node in Aries, we're just going to confront those parts of ourselves that have maybe grown resentful over the years around South Node Libra arenas, which is how we've maybe sacrificed or dulled our own needs and relationships for the sake of continuity and um, maybe even a bit of codependence for some.
Huge. Yes, huge codependence. And I would say appeasing.
Yeah.
Libras are like the greatest appeasers. They know how to shape almost who they are to what they know what the other person needs or wants.
Mhm.
Yes. So it'll be interesting because we really, even America, we have so much, um, with justice and freedom, and these are all very Libra traits, even though, it was formed with a Cancer sun, right? With that
In the seventh house.
in the seventh house, right?
Hmm.
So there's that Libra underlying that. And it's so interesting. So it's all about, for me, Libra's all about just like what America really had stood for, with, everything being a fair and equal, or, um, the bad guys being taken into justice and things like that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see this kind of reevaluation of some of those things as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and the United States' moon is in Aquarius, which further emphasizes that emotional desire to take care of all people, sometimes to the detriment of others, and trying to figure out the balance between equality among all in a way that is conducive to the growth of the country and doesn't hold us back, though. So it's still creating, there's still progress. It seems to me that the United States is trying to find this fine line between progress, but then also, you know, it's having their cake and eat it too, basically. Like, how do we get everything that we want
Sure.
while not sacrificing any of our needs?
Mm, yes. Well, and two, there feels as though, I mean, and maybe it's just because all the other stuff we've talked about and some of the studying I've done over the course of my life, but there feels as though at this time period there's a foreign entity that's just been at play or involved, or something that I can't quite put my finger on, so I can't totally articulate, but there seems to be, and with that North Node going into Aries, right? The foreign entity, maybe it's another country, maybe it's, more than one country, maybe it's the something coming in, or there's some other thing at play that we're not fully quite seeing yet.
Hmm. Well, I think that it would be made visible when Pluto squares the nodes.
Yeah, so that was actually, I was like, maybe it was a Pluto uncovering at some point.
Here we go. It starts on the 22nd. Pluto squares the nodes 3 times throughout that week, the 22nd, the 25th, and the 28th.
Okay.
And the first time it squares, the sun is in direct opposition and
Oh,
at the 29th degree of the cardinal cross, which is
that
like,
is insane.
this is big. This is huge. Not to mention that it's the birth month of the legal birthday of the United States with the current regime that we have. So when we see the solar or the sun's position in these vicarious placements, that directly reflects the head of the state. So the sun here, either something with Biden, the authority figures around him, that either there's information that comes out that's detrimental to the United States, or that there's information that comes out about him, or which I feel is more along the lines of the history of the United States and the progress that it's made um, in regards to, the United States. Pluto is in the second house. This is going to be in the second and eighth house axis for the United States, the Pluto Sun opposition. So this is about the debt as well, the money that's being spent, how money is being spent. I do think too financially, the United States is going to finally meet its maker, essentially, when it comes to how money is being spent on the military industrial complex. We've got North Node in Aries, which is Mars relationship to the military. So military is going to be huge, huge, huge. It's going to be dissected. We've already had someone from the military come out with disclosure around UFOs, and I feel like there's going to be a lot more around that comes up too. What's being hidden, what the government's been hiding, all of these secret programs, just way more coming out throughout the time period with Pluto squaring the nodes. Because for the United States, Pluto represents what it has had to do ruthlessly in order to gain power and financial control in the world stage. So that's also going to be a part of, like, we're going to see things that happened in the past. There might be more disclosure that comes out. There might be more revelations around what, financial sort of secret financial dealings went on in the history of the United States in order to determine or dictate the future of the citizens and how the state is run. And I think too, there will probably just be some awarenesses around Biden. Like there could even be like his history is on display for his foreign affairs throughout his career. It's like, well, you said this and you said this, and this is what you were voting for back in these times, and so on and so forth. So it's just kind of a coming to realizations of past discrepancies.
So crazy. I mean, yeah, and then I'm looking at the powers of this chart and kind of deciphering, with that Saturn retrograde in Pisces, so kind of taking a little bit of the power away from that Capricorn Pluto. But who has the power here? Would it be the sun, the nodes, or Pluto? Who has more?
Well, I would say that Pluto. Pluto is a pretty strong force, even though the sun itself brings life to our planet. but it's really a power struggle between the two. It's a power struggle that is made clear or obvious that has a really strong effect on the future of well, on a personal level, this week is going to be very important in terms of what decisions you make for yourself, because there are going to be situations from your past that come up that you think that you've been long gone and done with, that you're like, oh, I'm never going to have to deal with that again. And the funny thing about the universe is that it doesn't function in a linear timeline. It's cyclical, so you're never truly ever fully healed, which is what I've been hearing from, like, just having conversations out and about of like, oh yeah, I healed that long ago, or oh, I had this situation, but I'm over it. I'm like, okay, we'll see. So it's this is going to be the week where you have these coming to moments of like, oh, I thought I was over this. Like, I thought I was done with this. I thought that I had buried it long and gone, but lo and behold, now you can see the steps that you've taken throughout your life have actually been a reaction to that thing.
Okay. So it's gonna kind of could show its head.
Yes, yeah. So that's on the personal level, and then going back to the mundane transit for the collective and also the country, too, when we see the I think that the relationship to um financial power in the United States is going to be kind of big, in terms of how we move forward with how we so in the United States, Pluto's in the second house, which is finance and money, and how the United States uses, manipulates, or regulates money. So I think too, what's going to happen is that there's going to be a very strong decision that's made that is going to affect how we effectively use resources in this country. I know that there's a lot of, I just saw today actually that came out that Deutsche Bank put in a request to start legally using cryptocurrency, which is massive.
Really? I was
Yes.
just reading about them, but in regards to something completely else. So that's so interesting you just mentioned them. Um, so they're trying to use all cryptocurrency or just something in specific, like Bitcoin?
I'm I'm not sure. I'm assuming it's going to be Bitcoin. Um the currencies that have the most in reserve, and is, probably the most legitimate, but the whole crypto world is rapidly changing very quickly, and there's a lot of information that comes out that we can't trust because it's all being manipulated, which is Pluto, right? So a lot of information is being used in order to persuade public opinion in their movements to invest or not invest in something, so that these bigger corporations can benefit off of it's basically they're rigging they're rigging the game right now, to acquire as much Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as they possibly can, so that they can be the main shareholders. And then once they are the main shareholders, then they're like, okay, well, now we'll accept it as a form of currency because we have majority of it, so that we can control and dominate how it's being used.
Yeah.
It reminds me very much of the documentary of what happened to the electric car. So, like in the electric car in the 80s,
Mhm.
it was very possible we could have been driving electric cars since the 80s,
Right.
but the technology was manipulated, stomped, crushed, so that by GE, so that it can keep selling oil and cars that run on gas, That's Pluto and Capricorn in the second house. That's power. That's how we use power, literal power, oil and money.
So what was the name of that car? Do you remember the car? It was like in the 90s, I want to say. Only very
Was
few people had it. It was like very small.
was it a
And
Toyota
it was,
or was it a completely different brand? I can't remember.
I just remember what I specifically remember. I remember watching a documentary about this, and it was a car that I don't know if it was by Kia or what it was, but it was just this random electric car. Maybe it was the Volt. It was a random electric car that was running in the 90s, and then they just it didn't go anywhere. I mean, the people that had it loved it, you know, and it was like they were all about it. But the technology should have grown to like an exact, like a huge way by 2000 that it hadn't. It had been repressed and squashed and held back, if you will. And the more they held it back, the more they started to put out the Hummer and all these cars that were like the exact opposite of what this little electric car was doing. And
Hmm.
so it's why now it doesn't make 100% sense why they're totally now everything is being pushed to electric, right?
Yeah,
And
because they finally got control over the power grid. And so now they're okay with it.
mm,
Like, oh, no, we're not the corporations, Capricorn. We're not ready for this integration yet. So we're going to make everyone else live in the dark ages
yeah.
until our old, outdated selves can get with the times.
So did you watch, so I know you mentioned the stuff being uncovered by the alien tech about the alien technology and what's being
Yes.
in the military. So
Oh
that
my
was,
God.
did you just watch Stephen Greer? So Stephen Greer's documentary.
I watched that one a while ago. What is that one? What is that one called? Do you remember?
There's two. I think there's one that's like full disclosure or something disclosure. And
Hmm.
then there's the new one. I believe it's brand new. It's called The Last Century.
Oh, I haven't watched that one.
So that just came out. So
Ooh.
you'll have to watch that because it talks all about this specific thing that we're mentioning now. And it talks about um, inventors or people who have invented um, different contraptions or things that create energy, and they've been wiped off of the face of the earth. So basically, they go to get a patent for these types of things, and then the government steps in, and then they go bankrupt or they disappear or they get sick or all sorts of things. And so he goes over all of that in this uh,
Oh
new
my gosh.
new
That
documentary.
is so the epitome of this Pluto squaring the nodes that I'm talking about, especially for the military industrial complex. Like, it's the way to control and manipulate the evolution of society. And
So
if,
his theory is that if the technology since Tesla, right? Because when Tesla died, they went in and they took all of his files, right? So if the technology from that time to say even 2000 had been unleashed or revealed and people were able to build off of it, we would be in a completely different situation now than we currently are.
100%. So I think this is the week where we're going to see even more secrets around how we have been manipulated for government control and the military industrial complex, like all the things we could have had, all of the all of the innovation for the benefit of humanity that we could be doing right now, but has been manipulated and controlled by corporations for greed and power and domination and for financial gain as well.
Complete. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. So this is that's the day to kind of watch out for. Okay.
Yeah. And then also, so the same day, the sun moves into Leo. So we have a sun solar ingress into its sign, its home sign, which Leo represents the king or the authority, the president in the mundane chart. And then also when Venus goes retrograde. So the 22nd is a very big day.
Oh my, oh, so Venus goes retrograde on the 22nd as well.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
it's a very big day. Um, and Venus stays retrograde until September 3rd, I believe. Let me just double check my notes. Yes, and then she'll move all the way back to the 12th degree of Leo. So she's going to have a very long time in Leo, which I welcome very much. I love when Venus is in Leo. And also, I do also love Leo season. Um, it's Leo season in general is a fun time for us to reconnect with our younger selves, our childhood, our family. I feel like it's also, since it's the middle of summer, it's summer break, we're playing with our kids more, we're having fun, we're going on adventures. Not to completely change the subject, but also on this day too, we have these other things going on that, for people who don't watch or follow the news or the government secret programs and what have you, this is all other things are happening as well, which is, you know, maybe a bit more lighthearted. Um,
That sounds like a nice, yeah, like a nice reprieve.
yeah, yes. The interesting about the sun moving through Leo is that it's going to square Jupiter. And when it squares Jupiter, it's because it's in the fixed. Leo, all of the fixed signs are highlighted whenever something happens because of the squares and oppositions that come into play. So, Sun is going to meet with a square to the nodes, Jupiter, Uranus throughout its time in Leo, which I think really speaks to our relationship to celebrity, joy, our ability to have fun. It's like, yes, I want to have fun, but there's all these other things now that we have to think about, and we can't be totally uninhibited. So Jupiter and Taurus, which is of course money and finances and navigating that realm, as I have heard it be said before, it's like we're just going to have to be balling on a budget this summer. So, doing things with family that is a lot of fun, but just requires a bit more innovation on how to have that fun.
That okay. That's good to know.
hmm
Oh,
And
yeah.
then also, too, with your relationship to how you express yourself and your identity goes through a bit of a struggle, I guess, or just a remapping or reframing. So I think too with the Sun square Uranus, again, it's always this shift or need to adjust your role in friendship groups or in the community. You just might have what you want versus what the group wants to do are different, and having to make slight adjustments in order to appease everyone. So the Leo doesn't get to have its full reign this year with these other squares that happen, because it feels like it needs to temper or tame or adjust its self-expression, which Leo would prefer to not be told what to do or have to
Anyone
have.
like that, Leo, yeah, they do not want to be told what to do.
No. So that's the frustrating and irritating part of the Leo season this year is being like, well, why can't I just say what I want? Why can't I just express myself how I want to? And it's like, oh no, Uranus square. There's all these other responsibilities to all these other people. And also it's tied in with my money and finance. So I
Mhm.
can't
You can't do
maybe
it.
need to like, yeah, reel it in a little bit. Whereas, maybe in Gemini season, we felt a bit more freedom to let loose and communicate and say all the things that we felt and wanted to say. But it's just, yeah,
With
there's a,
that Mercury square, the Mercury square Uranus, is that what you mean? You were
yeah, Mercury is moving in, like all of the personal planets squaring that Jupiter and Uranus throughout throughout the month too. So yeah, it's a more, it's a constrained Leo.
that's not a fun Leo.
It's not fun.
It's not a fun Leo. I have that Mars in Leo, and so I feel as though um, it's a really hard to get me to do something I don't want to do.
Yes.
So I
So
know that Leo energy so well. Like,
may as well do it while there's a square
mm,
happening rather than an opposition where you're forced to
okay,
choose one or the other.
that's that's an interesting perspective. And I'm having a Mars return. What happens when a planet comes back? So, like, say you have a 28-degree Venus in Leo, and
Mhm.
Venus comes back to that point. Is there something significant or special about that particular day? I know it's kind of side note, but
Yeah, you can pull up a chart for the exact return and then read that chart as a divinatory kind of practice for understanding what phases or experiences you're having throughout the, kind of like a solar return, having throughout the next cycle of that planet. So with Venus in at 29 or 28 degrees, you can do a chart and look at what it looks like on your natal chart and see what other aspects are happening with Venus. In general, the planet return is like a reseeding, like a planting or reseeding of all themes regarding that planet. So with Venus, it's relationships, it's love, it's self love, it's how you love yourself. It's maybe coming into a new phase or a new cycle of how you express your love. Maybe you decide to take on more, or you decide to just readjust the way that you express your love. With Venus being in, let's see, in conjunct with Pluto.
right.
And, this year for all the Venus returns at 29 degrees, it'll be like, well, how much am I giving? And is it too much?
Mm,
And where do I need to restrict the amount that I am giving? Because we all know Leo loves to shower others with adoration and also receive the same amount of adoration that they give. And so with Venus and Leo, it's like, okay, what I really want is this huge lavish birthday party to show all of my friends how much I love them, but really squaring Uranus and Taurus, my friends can't afford it, or they can't come, or they can't meet me in this place. So I'm going to have to readjust my values for what love means to me so that I can, um, yeah, just kind of meet in the middle.
that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I do see that in conjunct happening um, to Pluto.
hmm
Hmm.
the limits and capacities. And so
Aspect, right? And in conjunction is usually a little bit odd.
yeah, and conjuncts are like blind spots.
Okay.
So it's like the planets can't see each other.
Oh,
And so you have to make a concerted effort to bring those two energies together.
I see.
So it's kind of like it's almost like a Uranian type energy where they're disconnected, and
Mm,
so you have to do the work in a creative and innovative way to blend those energies together because other people may be experiencing that in conjunct within you, and you might have that as your blind spot, for instance. Like, other people might see you as, let's say, being really uh reliable and show up and supportive, but then only during certain times, and then you don't realize that, and you just think, oh, I'm always I'm loyal and supportive.
yeah.
Like, yeah, but only during this and this time. So that's like a sun moon in conjunct, or yeah, it's just kind of like a personal blind spot that you don't really see for yourself.
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah, that's a great, because I always look at them and I'm like, I just always see them as odd aspects, but that a blind spot is much clearer.
Hmm. Yes, I have a yod, so my moon is an in conjunct the sun and also in conjunct Saturn.
Mm.
So I'm very interested and invested in conjuncts.
Yeah, because it's like that's a thing. The yod or the yod is a finger of God. Is that
Hmm.
typical?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's the Hebrew symbol called yod, and then in astrology is, I guess, been it wasn't the in conjunct was never really accepted in traditional astrology. It was never used, but it's more of a modern astrology term where we're seeing it show parts of our, it's more very psychological, like it's showing our parts of our psyche
Right.
and psychology that helps to paint a bigger picture around our personal experiences.
So an inconjunct, I'm trying to think because I think I have one in my chart, um but I have but now I'm thinking about it, I think it's a sextile, not a inconjunct, and it points to Taurus. I'll have to relook at that because I might be reading
Mm,
the chart wrong.
hmm.
Um,
So there's
this is a this is a crazy day. What what would
Mhm.
your suggestion be, other than, keeping an eye out for certain news stories, but also and trying to have fun? Um,
I
uh,
would say it depends on who you are, right? Because what I say could be relevant for some people, but not other people. For instance, like when it comes to Leo and that Venus retrograde and all these T squares, like for some people, it means showing up and being even more bold and more vibrant and more unapologetic for who you are and expressing that confidence in yourself and um, having that stronger awareness of self love and how you care about yourself. Um, and for others, it might be the reverse, right? Where it's it's like, well, see how much space you take, and to the point where you're not allowing enough space for others to express themselves fully or passionately, or your reaction to other people who are confident in themselves and see, what does it spur inside of you. Sun opposite Pluto with Leo, it's there's also the beginning budding phases of Leo, which enters that timid, shy, kind of getting used to self-expression and like overcoming wallflower, Cancer
Mhm.
energy. And so some people do need that boost of confidence, and other people might see that as weak. So I think it's just an interesting day for all people to self-reflect on your relationship to your confidence, how you express yourself, what it looks like to others. Some people might want to go through a rebranding, for instance, or a restructuring of how they show up in the world. And also, some people might want to hone in even harder in who they are. So I think it for sure varies person to person, but overall, we're going to meet you know go through the process of understanding who we are among a group, and where we stand within that group, and then identifying where we go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Hmm.
So the rest of the week. So you said that whole week is jam packed. That sounds like enough for a full week right there.
Right. So not only is the Venus retrograde coming in, but then the rest of the week, the 25th and the 28th, Pluto hits the T square with the nodes, um, throughout that time. So we're just going to keep feeling the back and forth of that, um, T square. And then at the end of the week, we have Mercury ingressing into Virgo. And then, um, so here we are on the 28th, which is the last Pluto square the nodes. And then this is kind of our last major shift.
And then so what happens? What does this day look like? Day zero.
So we have Mercury moving at 0 degrees Virgo, which is its home sign, is its home turf.
Right.
Mercury will have us, thinking now more about the simpler things in life, whereas throughout the month, we were focusing on grand expressions and how can we be heard and how can I be seen and how can I get people's attention with what I have to say. And now Mercury is in Virgo, where it's much more humble, I'll say. um, Humble in its desires for just wanting to get the day to day taken care of. Now it's like the ambitions are more focused on your daily tasks, on what you can do incrementally rather than the larger expressions, the small things. It's communicating the small things that are really important that sometimes get overlooked or overshadowed by the larger, grander, personal expressions. Also, Mercury with in the sign of the planet of movement, the messenger of the gods, is bringing in awareness for us to focus on our health. Of course, we can't not talk about Virgo and
Mhm.
ignore health and the way that we treat our bodies and the way that we maintain, a balanced day-to-day work life relationship. Also, you might notice that there's just more that needs to be communicated in more detail, that you can't skip over any information, that you might have to be more particular about the way you talk and the information that you give, because everyone is under the influence of Mercury and Virgo. So everyone is going to be wanting more details. So we're all going to be like, but what do you mean by that? What is that? What do you, but how much is this? Where, just all the small incremental pieces of info that paint the bigger picture.
Especially with Mars there in Virgo as well. That
Yeah,
would
definitely.
heightened.
So it ad nauseum is the
Yeah.
is one of the key words for that. Just yeah, constantly going over the same sort of bits that, you know, in order to make the ship run smoothly. And then let's see. We have, it's a really nice aspect for Mercury throughout its time in Virgo because it makes a trine to that Jupiter, a trine to that Uranus. Um, it eventually moves into opposition with Saturn and Neptune. So throughout its time in Virgo, there is going to be, conversations that have to be had in regards to, work objectives and restructuring how you communicate and how you go about your day. Could be something as simple as using a different calendar, than you're used to, or like
When
figuring out a different method for, you know, accessing or completing a task or a goal.
and then when does, and sorry to cut you off, but when does Saturn go direct?
That is in November, I want to say. Let me just double check because I don't remember anything.
No, I was
um,
wondering if it was any time
it's
in the next 2 months, but if it's November, then we have more time. I think it
oh
goes
yeah,
around 0 degrees
yes. So
of
November 4th.
okay. So we have
Hmm.
yeah, we have a while.
Yes. So there's time there, and yeah, Mercury Virgo, just generally a productive time. I think information flows more smoothly. I think that we have an easier time of accessing our minds. So it's easier to do tasks and focus on the small things. It could be a great time to balance your checkbook.
Yeah.
Checkbook. uh,
Clean your house. There's that
Clean your
element.
house.
All the menial tasks that I feel like um, we don't want to do.
Yes.
That'll be a nice forward moving time frame.
Yes. Yeah. And then
Okay.
with the trines to Jupiter and Uranus, we're finding new ways to expand on our work and our skill set and developing good tools that we can use for the future of, just creating an easier, more efficient life in our mundane worlds.
This is so good. So much going on. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that nodal shift is gonna be a huge energetic change.
Huge, massive. It always is. And I think it's always really fascinating when people. So I've been reading charts for clients now for 8 years, and I've been focusing on the nodes, which is my favorite thing to do with clients because it's so helpful to see where our focus is. And it's just, there's some clients that might have a harder time finding that north node because they have their own strong will for what they want to do and they have their own timeline, um right, their own egos drive for a certain timeline in their lives, whether that be like children, jobs, certain pinnacles that we have as success for us. But then when we look at the nodes and where they're at, it's like, well, actually, that's not for another 2 years.
Right. Right.
So you're beating against the grain or you're swimming upstream here
So
when
say with the nodes, do they predict, or they're the indicator of um life purpose, or what they
Pathways.
okay.
Yeah, life purpose in your natal chart, and then the transits where they are transiting over your chart is pathways and
Mm,
doors.
okay.
So, yeah, why would you be trying all these other doors that are locked over and over and over again when the door that's unlocked is down there, 5 doors down, which is that house, seventh house, eighth house, ninth house, what have you. So knowing where Aries is in your chart is going to be super helpful. And I always find too that people who um, do a lot of, self-reflection, inner work, or just already naturally feel tapped into the universal energies, already naturally start like it's almost like a magnetic field that we're all tuned into. And um, there's a majority of us will already just be tuning into what to go towards.
Mhm.
And so I noticed that they're like, and I think we all do that. So it's like, I think that I have to start restructuring how my schedule looks on a daily basis.
Right.
Like North Node in the sixth house. They're already thinking about those things for
Well,
themselves.
is that so? If North Node's in the sixth, this is a whole other podcast. But if North Node's in the sixth, and say it's in a totally different sign than something that would be about structures, right? Or uh, mine happens to be Cancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then my North Node is in the sixth. Would
Hmm.
is that is that something where I'd be worried about motherhood, or be focused on motherhood, or I'd be focused on the structures, which is typically Capricorn.
Um, right. So it would be, so you think about the blend of Cancer, what are the characteristics of that, which is nurturing, caring, nostalgic, motherly. And where is that? Where are those characteristics being expressed? It's
Mhm.
in the sixth house of employees,
Mhm.
landlords, daily work. And it's navigating your daily life with care. It's navigating your daily life with your family in mind. And it's also connecting with employees like they are your family, and they are, or like you are the mother, or seeing yourself as the mother figure with your employees, or having that very nurturing role in
Mhm.
your employees' lives. Whereas in the Capricorn, you might naturally be inclined to sit on this like more Capricornian role of like dad, right? Of the dad, or the authority figure, 12th house, which maybe is not always visible or not always seen, or just like kind of overseeing the full picture or like the big scheme, seeing it as like a bigger corporate experience. And but really the sixth house would be, you bringing them lunch
Got it.
or
Nurture,
something.
more nurturing. Okay.
Which I have had. Cancer bosses are some of my favorite, because they're always feeding you. And
That's perfect. That sounds great, but I definitely that definitely resonates. So it would be interesting to do an episode on the just the nodes. You know,
Mm,
this nodal shift's coming, and how it how it affects people, how it affects everyone, and
hmm
also how to read it in your own chart to decipher, what is your kind of more focus or purpose driven, because you're not right. The north node is what you're not born with, in my understanding, right? It's like not doesn't come not how am I saying this? It's not your normal mode of operation.
Yeah, yeah,
South node is always like the normal mode of operation. And how can you be more like your node is the way I seem to
yeah, yeah. It's like your aspiration,
mm,
what to aspire to.
aspire to.
Yeah.
So this is, yeah, this seems like a wild ride coming up here. And
Mhm.
I'm so grateful to have this insight, you know, especially because uh, this one seems a little bit more, almost a little more wild than June, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the Pluto doesn't square the nodes every day or even every year. So it's a larger scheme for us to navigate as humans here on Earth. And Pluto, of course, all being so karmic between the three can is a big karmic revelation or karmic um uncovering for us. So two people who do work with ancestral work or even just have been doing working with their own karmic cycles is going to be very important for them during that week, especially.
Yep. So good. So good. Thank you so much, Evelyn, for everything and just this insight and like I said before, giving us a heads up for the month ahead. I am beyond grateful to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate that so much.